Welcome back to Laid Open Podcast. I'm your host, Charna Cassell. I've just recorded this episode and I can feel how much and how big this material is. And it's not an easy episode to listen to. So I want to let people know that there are discussions of domestic violence, child abuse, religious abuse, and what's happening in the world and around Project 2025 and highly controlling religious cults and communities. And so there's a lot packed into this episode. So you might want to listen to it in bite-sized pieces. I invite you to ground in your body by breathing into your pelvic floor and out your feet and feeling your butt in your chair and pressing your back into the seat that you're sitting in while you're listening. Relax your belly, get a glass of water, pet your dog, do all the things. Maybe you take a walk while you're doing this, or I'd like to listen to podcasts while I'm gardening. It's not an easy episode, but I think it's a really important episode. My guest today is a woman named Margaret Bronson that I discovered on Instagram, and she's doing really important work. She founded Deconstructionist Doulas, and she helps people who are recovering from religious trauma. And she lives with her 4 children and her husband in Kansas City. And I really think this is an important episode, and I hope you listen through and share this with people that need this kind of support, because she has moved through a tremendous amount and found the resources to heal and embody herself in a way that is pretty remarkable.
Learn how to live embodied. Your life is about to unwind. Uncover new tools and start healing. Leave trauma and tension behind. Isn't it great laid open? Let all your desires come true. How can you live laid open? Imagine yourself brand new. Imagine yourself brand new.
Welcome, Margaret. I'm so glad to finally have you on and to be having this conversation with you.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So to give our listeners some context, how did you start doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so my family entered a cult when I was 8-ish years old, and this was pretty intense. Like, women always have to wear skirts, keep their heads covered at all times. You know, the father picks who you marry. My particular pastor was lobbying the state to gain the legal right to stone disobedient children, like very out there. And my family just kind of got stuck in it, got caught up in it. And so from ages 8 to 16, that was my whole world. That was everyone that I knew for the most part. And then we got excommunicated when I was 16 because my parents turned in a pedophile within the church to the state, and that broke the rules with the cult. And so we got excommunicated, but my parents kind of froze at that point. And we weren't physically there anymore, but they hadn't, deconstructed any of the ideology yet. And so at 19, I was still living under cult rules, even though we weren't part of it. And so I managed to get out by marrying my now husband and moving halfway across the country. He was a Southern Baptist pastor. And at first, that was really healing. It felt like a safe spirituality after what I came out of. But the longer that I was in that area, in that SBC, Southern Baptist Convention world, a lot of the things that I grew up with, I started realizing they were here too and actually increasing. And the leaders of the cult that I had been a part of as a child started being recommended resources within the churches that we are a part of. People started doing a lot of the rituals and practices that had been part of my culty upbringing. So I fought that as much as I could. I tried to warn people. I don't think I changed anyone's mind. We ended up getting kicked out of 2 different churches as a result of that, and at that point, I was just in so much pain and had been through essentially 3 shunnings at this point, and I didn't have anywhere else to turn. I'd lost everybody, and so I just started processing my unwinding of all of my questioning, my curiosity, my challenging, my grief online. And so I started connecting with other people who had similar experiences, and from there, as I started to realize and learn language like cult and authoritarian and control and manipulation and all of these things, Deconstruction Doulas was kind of born out of that and sharing those resources with other survivors.
What do you think made your parents vulnerable to joining a cult?
Yeah, so my dad was born 9 months after the end of World War II, and so he was raised in a home with a father who had terrible PTSD, very absent, abusive. My mom was the child of missionaries, so she was raised abroad, and they got married fairly late in life, and I think that they both had no idea how to come together as parents and to, like, how do we parent? Like, my dad felt like he had no tools to start with. My mom knew that what she was raised with wouldn't work in this context, and so they were just looking for direction, and at the time, really the only place to get direction for parenting was religious. And so they started listening to Focus on the Family, which was a very well-known evangelical radio station, and that actually is where they got in contact with my cult and kind of went down that pipeline.
And it's okay. I mean, if you're okay mentioning their names. So I believe that James Dobson was
Mhm.
connected to that radio program and that the book. He was a evangelical psychologist who wrote that book
Yeah.
about how to parent that a lot of Christian families took up, and I guess because of
Yeah.
that radio show. And then your leader was Doug Wilson.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, who has a foot in the door in a terrifying way. I mean, God, did you
Yeah.
ever think that you would see him so much in public view?
I mean, I was shocked when he showed up in my evangelical church in my 20s that people were taking him seriously because I kind of thought, oh, we all had learned the lesson that I had learned, which was that he wasn't safe, because most of the kids that I grew up with were deeply struggling. And I felt like it was obvious that this stuff wasn't holding up. But yeah, I like to say I had a triple dose of Doug Wilson because I was in a church that followed his teachings, but I also was homeschooled following his classical education. And so it's very propagandized, like manifest destiny, crusades were the best thing ever, the Reformation, like it focuses on these different moments of like Christian colonizing triumph and that, I mean, the theology is that God has like passed on Israel and has moved on to America as his chosen people. And we're supposed to be this city on the hill where everything is perfect and we follow Old Testament law. And once that happens, once Old Testament law rules in America, Jesus will return and we'll have essentially a new Eden.
I'm still kind of reeling from the stoning children.
Yeah.
I mean that there were things or that your family's excommunicated. I mean, which it happens all the time. It's like, let's keep the institution whole and let's reject the people that speak out against harm towards children,
Yeah.
right? It's very, very common. We see that in, you know, universities, We obviously see that with the Catholic Church, etc. So it's not surprising, but it's really heartbreaking when I think about two people that just want to know how to do something right and to care for their children, and then they just kind of swallow the information whole. But they know enough to go, wait, this is not right. Pedophilia is not right. Let's get our
Yeah.
children, or let's speak out about this. And so I'm glad they were excommunicated. It probably saved
Yeah.
you in a certain way.
Yeah.
But
Two
this,
things that tell
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Two things I tell my parents all the time. One is you are victims as well. They also became perpetrators, but that they were victims as well, and that it was a good instinct in them to look for direction in how to parent.
Mm.
That was a good instinct. They wanted to do better for their kids than they had, but that was exploited. And the second thing is no one ever joined these cults knowing what they're getting into.
Of course.
There's always the marketing message. The marketing message was you're going to have a strong nuclear family. You're going to spend lots of time with our culture today. Families don't spend enough time together. They're not having meals at the table together. They're not having these big conversations together. You're going to have this strong marriage. We're not going to have any infidelity. We're going to have men who really take responsibility for their family. They're not going to be absentee dads. They're not going to be, letting their families just kind of whatever. They're going to really make sure that their kids get not just financially taken care of, but also emotionally and raised to know what's right,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what my parents bought into. By the time the real message starts to reveal itself, there's this sunk cost fallacy that happens where you cut off everyone else out of your life. You've made financial sacrifices. You're in so deep. It's just a really well-laid trap.
Right. And I mean, what you're describing also is domestic violence, right? So
Yeah.
there's the abuse of children, which of course, if you're starting out that way, I mean, there's also blanket training, right?
Uh-huh.
This
Yeah.
that starts at 6 months. If I understand correctly, a baby is placed on a blanket, and if it crawls off, then it's hit. And so it's still
Yep.
trying to break the will of this child.
Mm-hmm. And the idea is that that's loving because with each passing month, their will is only going to get stronger. And so you're going to be able to break their will with the least amount of harm done if you start young.
Right. And what's wild is the notion, right? So it's sold to them as this is loving, but everything is fear-based,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, and there's a lot of course, there's financial fear of here you have this community of support. You won't be destitute in the way that basically our country, it's so hard financially to survive.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's leaning on one another, yet at the same time, all these people are isolated. And then if women are not allowed to work, then they're dependent on their potentially abusive husbands. And so there's just these cycles of isolation and dependency
Mm-hmm.
that get perpetuated. Because, literally, if you're that baby that's blanket trained and your will is broken, how do you become a self-sufficient adult who can leave the cult?
Well, and I mean, the people that I work with, they did leave the cult, but even now, all of us talk about it frequently, how we still don't feel like adults. It's really hard for us to be in a room with other adults and feel like we're equals, that there's just this confidence that other people have. There's this sureness that they just have a confidence in their own perception of reality there. Whereas we're so used to being gaslit and second guessing our own perception of things that we kind of walk through the world with an extra layer of, I don't know if I'm interpreting things correctly. I don't know if I'm reliable. I might actually be bad. I might actually be dangerous kind of stuff. And we have to fight that all the time. It must have been out for 15, 20 years.
Yeah, that's so heartbreaking. And
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge how massively courageous the work that you're doing is. You identify as a deconstructionist doula, and this notion of helping people rebirth themselves and find that liberation and find more self-awareness and find more, stable ground underneath their feet, given our political climate in the United States right now, it is so radical, and I'm grateful that you're doing that work.
Thank you. Sometimes it feels like it's too little, too late, but everyone who gets out matters.
What were your steps to feeling enough, given what the picture you painted, what were your steps to gaining enough confidence to turn towards other people? Like, you had to do a certain amount of healing for yourself before you could then offer a lifeboat to others.
So, a couple of things. One is I would say that my husband, David, was actually the first deconstruction doula. He has seen both my value and also the ways that I was broken, and that and kind of the path to help me regain what was lost, my confidence, my voice, my understanding. And so he has just been such a champion, and essentially like we worked together to create our own somatic before we had education, right? Our own somatic practices, our own ways of trying to like rebuild what was broken. And then just a lot of personal study and research to the point where, and I think also life just got so hard, and I basically had nothing left to lose. So I wouldn't even say that it was confidence as much as like desperation that initially started. And then as I've done the work, seeing my thesis, as it were, proven over and over and over and over again on both sides. This thing broke us in these ways. This is the path to healing. And this holds up every time. And this holds up, every time. I've just gained a lot of confidence through experience.
Right. With each conversation you have with other survivors. It blows my mind what a resource. Social media is definitely has it's very problematic in certain ways, but I love the resource that it has become for people who would normally be very isolated. And when you're alone, or when you perceive you're alone, right? You make it about yourself, and there's a lot of
Yep.
internalized shame and a lot of like, I'm bad, and no one else would understand this. And yet when you're in a large global community through social media, you find your people.
I feel like cults both increased because of the internet, that interconnectedness, the message gets out easier. The internet's also kind of been the antidote to it. It's almost like in nature where, you have the poison and the antidote always grow right next to each other. It's one of those.
That's amazing. You mentioned that your husband and you created your own somatic practices, and I'm curious to hear more about that. What were those?
Yeah. So one of the first things that we identified was a very intense level of dissociation, depersonalization. I didn't feel like a human. I felt like I was an energy that existed to take care of the real humans. And so first was just, talking about that, raising awareness for it, being able to identify, oh, that was self-abandonment. Like that was me not behaving like a person, that was me assuming everyone else has rights that I don't have access to, that kind of thing. And so just kind of like taking a pause when that would happen and almost rewriting those moments, being like, okay, the way I would respond if I believed I was a whole person would be like this. But also a complete disconnection from my body. I couldn't feel my body from about the chin down. And so, my husband spent lots of time with non-sexual touch, right? Lots of brushing, massaging, trying to bring me into my body, tight squeezes, weighted blankets, all these things. Movement. I learned that I need really high intensity of movement. That helps really bring me into my body. And then specifically sexually, realizing that one of the greatest harms done by the culture that I was raised in was the whole too much, too fast, right? I was supposed to essentially not even know what sex really was until right before my wedding. And then I was supposed to go from, we didn't do this, but a lot of my peers did, and they were the ones who were following the rules.
Mhm.
They weren't even supposed to hold hands or kiss
Yeah.
before marriage, but they don't believe that any consent is needed other than the wedding ceremony. And so even though my husband did not in any way, shape, or form pressure me, it was so baked into my brain
Mhm.
that he would leave me if I didn't,
Yeah.
that I performed a lot of obligation sex for a long time. And that's something that we had to acknowledge, grieve, both of us. Because, like, I mean, that's horrifying for me, and it's horrifying for him to realize that was happening, even though he didn't, like, know that was happening. And then we essentially went celibate for a solid year, just having a relationship with all the other lovely, like, romantic touch
Mhm.
without that on the table. So that essentially so much of coming out of a cult, especially if you're, like, raised in it, is having to go back and go through the developmental processes that you weren't allowed to go through, like, retroactively. Like, just,
Yes.
like, I didn't get to be a teenager and differentiate and become my own person and experiment and play with expression, like self-expression. I still have to go through that stage to become a full adult, right?
Yeah.
And so we essentially, like, restarted the sexual part of our relationship, but we didn't focus on our relationship part. We focused just on me. And, like, I got to go at my speed and tell him when I was ready to take it to the next step. And then, like, even then, still go very slow as if it really was a first time, and allow myself to actually have, like, a sexual awakening of my own on my own terms that reflected me and my will and what I wanted and desired. So yeah, that's it's a lot of that kind of stuff.
No, that's so beautifully said. So well done. I want to give your husband a virtual hug. I'm
Yeah,
so glad you picked well and
me too.
that you both had the patience and care to do that because it's very similar to how I would be walking someone through the process. And we were speaking before we started recording, and I have said over the 20 something years that I've sat with clients working with sexual trauma, I have seen how simply being raised in a conservative or fundamentalist religious household, or even a Catholic household, lives in the body like sexual trauma.
Yeah.
So much of the shame and the energetic constrictions, because our thoughts, create physical and energetic constrictions and lack of flow in our
Mhm.
bodies, which allows for self-expression to occur. And so to take the pressure of sex off the table and to allow lots of space for you to start to pay attention to what your internal signals and impulses are versus like if that was beaten out of you or trained out of you through brainwashing, you don't know what is what. Like you were saying, you're like, what is reality? Can I trust myself? Can I trust my instincts? So all of that is stuff that happens in when you're raised in a family where there's sexual abuse or where
Mhm.
you have a narcissistic or borderline parent where like all of your needs and feelings are disallowed,
Yeah.
right? Very similar.
Yeah, and, we navigated it intuitively, and also just both of us are neurodivergent and just found every book we could possibly read. But one of those just, like, beautiful little, let's call them coincidences, is that my first job after we got married was managing a physical therapy clinic
Mm,
where there was a pelvic floor physical therapist.
yes, yes.
And so working with her and listening to her, and we had a lot of military women, and they all had intense pelvic floor dysfunction.
Mm.
The religious women had intense pelvic floor dysfunction, and she would talk about the patterns she was seeing. And then we started treating my vaginismus.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of where some of that journey started.
So, for our listeners, I just want to name and explain what vaginismus is, right? So, there's this brilliant thing that our body does when we override what we're feeling, our body will have boundaries for us. If we don't feel like we have the permission, to have a boundary and to say no, our body will do it for us. So for men, they may not be able to get an erection. For women, the muscles or walls of their vagina and can close, or they can have vulvodynia, which is pain around the opening. And so this is your body's way of saying, no, go slow, wait. Amazing. What a blessing that you had that resource right there. That's incredible.
There's so many little things like that where it's like, wow, it was just like the literal perfect storm to get me out to where I am now.
And there's so many threads and pieces that I want to talk about. So regarding the work that you're doing with the women that you're helping, what are the different resources that you have? Are you providing everything, or are you connected with different organizations and then you kind of link them up with a bunch of different people that help them?
Yeah. So I like to point people in the direction of experts. And a lot of that work is just helping people believe that they're safe enough to work with experts in different fields. There's so much fear around different topics, or, we come from the cult that's telling us all that expertise makes actually people more unreliable. And so, telling that their salvation is not going to be in jeopardy if they seek help from a sex therapist or something like that,
Over the years, I have worked with clients that there was there's ancestral sexual trauma in their families. And, one of the stories that really stood out to me was somebody who went to their pastor or church leader and saying, there's this abuse that's happening in the family, and them being encouraged to stay in the marriage and not break up the marriage. Right. And then the abuse continuing, or the abuse turning like the siblings then abusing one another. Right. And so it becomes this really insular experience that just keeps continuing.
Yeah, absolutely. We see it all the time in these families. There's so much sibling on sibling abuse. And it's horrifying because the perpetrators are also victims. And it's heartbreaking, and it destroys families completely.
Well, and for any of these women, so like if a woman was wanting to get out and there's no resource inside, obviously, their community and the people who are following the rules all around them, right? It's like if they're even trying to seek marital counseling or any support, they're being told they're bad for wanting external support. So what are the pieces that even allow them to get to the point where they can reach out to someone like you?
They have to have tried through all of the approved methods so many times and gotten desperate. Like in my particular cult, if you're having marital issues, you absolutely do not go anywhere except for to your pastor. And within that system, a lot of times the solution to any marital issue will be that you perform sex more often. And, we're talking about women who never gave consent for sex ever and have, 8 children. And they're just spiraling and exhausted and triggered all the time, and just so like self-protective and wound tight. And eventually they have to get to the point of being desperate enough to look outside of the cult. And so the internet is actually one of the safest ways they can do that. It's just going to a different account on Instagram and sending DMs and then deleting them, that kind of thing.
What are some so the trad wife movement is a thing that's building momentum.
Yeah.
And who are some ex-trad wives that you can point to that are other
Yeah.
resources for people?
The first one that I would point to is Tia Levings. She raised her children as a trad wife, and now she is out and she has written a whole book called The Well-Trained Wife. It's heartbreaking to read, but it's so good. And she's so strong, and she's helping so many women leave the trad wife world. Part of the way that I run my account, and her as well, is, we have to remain safe enough for people in the cult to engage with us.
Right.
So, we can't be completely unvarnished and honest and fully express who we are today. You know what I mean? Because we have to remain safe enough for those women who are just like brave enough to look just outside the circle of safety. There should be people right there. And so that's where I position myself. I would say Tia has also positioned herself in a similar place, trying to be a safe landing place for those who are brave enough to look outside of that circle. Another one would be Kate West. She wrote a book called Rift. She actually was a stay-at-home daughter. This is part of our cult. If you don't get married, you remain under your father's authority, living in his house, caring for his home forever. Because every woman has to be under male headship.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's so common, right? I mean, I think that's one of the things. I saw a reel that you were speaking to somebody about, and the reality that we think this is like scary sci-fi possibilities, but that it's already here, and it's a growing trend. And we have Doug Wilson whispering in the ear of Pete Hegseth, and that's terrifying, right?
It is. Yeah. I mean, earlier I said I got a triple dose of Doug Wilson, and I didn't get to the third part. So the third part is that we were not Republican growing up. We were a Constitution Party, which is a third party that essentially existed to try and bring back theocracy, because they believed that America was initially founded under the Articles of Confederation as a theocracy. And so the crazy thing for me is being in these tiny little conference rooms with maybe 13 people. I was 13 years old taking notes for the meeting, while these men, maybe 10, 12 men, sitting around planning what's happening now. And it seemed so ridiculous and far off, and like it was just a thing that they were doing for themselves, but no one ever thought it was actually going to happen. To now see where we're at, my brain can't make it make sense. It's so intense.
Can you speak a little more to that? I mean, the idea that Project 2025 was something that has been being planned for decades.
If you want to dive deeply into this, what you're going to want to search for is Christian Reconstructionists or Christian Reconstructionism, Gary North, Greg Bonson, and R.J. Rushdoony. And essentially, they had this dream of America as a city on a hill, America as run by God. And there's just a few men who get to deliver what God wants to us, essentially. And it's a return to Old Testament law where, you have a few strong men protect everybody else and run the show for everything. And then you have these hyper feminine, as Doug Wilson says, essentially people who exist to give birth to other people. It's all about conquering. It's all about colonizing, not just land and cultures, but individual people. And the truth is that they aren't trying to make a world that is good for everyone. They only want a world that is good for them, and they don't want anyone else to be there. And so when you see these policies and you're like, how could anyone be okay with this? It's hurting so many people. Like, that's the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can feel my system And I can track myself well, but I can feel my system want to dissociate around it. So just I feel like I can start getting kind of foggy and spaced out. And sometimes that's like I'm feeling the person I'm interviewing, and other times I know it's like for me, I'm just like it's a lot. I can feel my
It's really dark
stop breathing while we're talking about this. Yeah.
and scary, and just their proximity to power right now is really alarming. And so I think a lot of people do check out on these conversations. And in my work, that's been one of the hardest things, has been the safe people, the people who
Yeah.
could do something and who could help, having such a hard time engaging with the reality of what we're facing right now. I never wanted to be the person talking about stoning children,
Yeah.
in public. Like, I don't want, no one wants to talk about these things. They're
Right.
like
Right.
so dark and yucky.
And honestly, there are things that are even darker and yuckier.
Sure.
And I have wanted to talk about them to know, because until something is not normalized, as in like let's make it all normal, but until something can get talked about, you can't actually have solutions. You can't if you don't build the awareness around something occurring, the solutions aren't needed, right?
Right.
And so it's really, really tricky because I know that some of the things that I've dealt with clients or even in my own history, people don't want to talk about those things. It's too disturbing to turn towards.
I mean, you see it with racism as well. We want to say
Yeah.
racism's dead. We want to say it's over. And that's just honestly cowardly at some point, Like, at first it can be naive, but eventually it becomes cowardly. Like, we want to rest on our laurels and think we've made it when actually, like, we're going to lose it.
I was just going to say the function of denial. I mean, because, I work within family systems, but you're working on a much bigger scale. You're working with family, but you're working on a systemic level. And that is something where that's where I get stuck of like, how does that change occur? Change happens when people want to change, right? Like they're coming in and seeking out support
Yeah.
versus when you're holding a system that doesn't want to change and it's fighting you. It's
Yeah.
like mandated therapy on a systemic level. And so, yeah, it's a lot.
I think that the thing that we're going to have to, any sort of resistance is going to have to understand is what it is that is drawing people to things like Doug Wilson, the trad wife movement, patriarchy, and cults in general. And there's a lot of systemic issues in our culture. One of them is the breakdown of the family, right? One of them is the breakdown of the village, right? This interconnectedness. Our cults offer that. They offer you a family, a place to belong, a culture, a heritage, a mission, a purpose. And I think that all efforts on the large scale of resistance will be futile until we have a counter narrative that also attempts to meet those needs. They're attempting to meet those needs, but it's a trap. They're not actually trying to meet those needs. They're essentially leveraging those needs to gain control over people.
Yes.
We need to heal as a society. We need to understand what's broken about us anthropologically, sociologically, and, rebuild communities and villages and have reciprocity instead of capitalism and all of these things.
Yes. Well said. And what are in terms of embodied freedom? Like what does that mean to you? What does that look like?
So embodied freedom starts with listening. I'm trying to become a student of my body. Well, even like little things, like, people ask, what's your favorite color? I used to have no idea how to answer that question. It was just like, I think everyone just makes it up, But I noticed like my body responds differently to the color green. And there's like an excitement there. And so it's little things like that, as well as larger things. Like if my body starts to hurt, I am very good at immediately suppressing that, ignoring that, moving on with my life, but instead letting my body be heard.
Mhm.
And, I don't always have the option to slow down and stop, but doing little things that I can to honor what my body's telling me, and then just seeking joy in movement, in play. At this point, I feel so embodied and free that, like, my age or the fact that, I'm supposed to be a woman and a feminine, or, that I'm heavy, right? None of those things all used to dictate what I could do with my body.
Mm.
I'm too old for this, or this isn't feminine enough, or, I'm not thin enough for this activity or whatever. None of those things register anymore. They just feel like that, like, I don't know, weird memories from a
Mm.
past life.
Mm.
And I just give my body what it wants when it wants it. And I listen to my body, and I'm I feel so, it's not just in my body, it's also in my head because there's so much noise and fear and, like, limits. I just feel free. I just get to be me, and, do what I want when I want it, and care for my body when it needs it, the way my body likes to be cared for, and not just, "You are a 34-year-old woman, so you must do these things," you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my, I'm so happy for you. I want that for everybody. I
Me
really,
too.
really want that for everybody. And it's one of the things that, I don't take it for granted. And then I also, it's just mind blowing how many people don't have access to that.
Yeah,
And I just want anyone who's listening to know that it's possible. If it's possible for you, Margaret, yeah.
yeah.
And then it's also, there's a level of diligence and self-responsiveness that takes, right? Like you didn't know that your body came alive around green overnight,
Mm,
right? You can't read a book and discover that. Like it's something you need to put your body into practices and to keep that key piece of like listening and feeling. I mean, some people, they feel everything. I was one of the feel everything people, but people are numb and literally can't feel their bodies unless my hands are on their physical body.
yeah.
Right? And even then, there's a level of denseness that's taking care of them and protecting them from feeling the amount of terror that they would have felt. But it's just like, yeah, yeah, I'm so glad that you've come home to yourself in that way and that you had such a good support in your partner and that
Mm,
you are doing the work that you're doing.
yeah, thank you. I will say, healing was the most exhausting, painful, felt like there was never gonna be a light at the end of the tunnel, like, it was just always gonna be awful, and I was just always gonna be, I mean, I definitely still struggle with a lot of the different cult programming things. I still notice them, I still have to draw attention to them and try and, rewrite the algorithm and the program,
Yeah.
but on this side where I'm at now, I can say that every ounce of effort and, frustration and all the things was so worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Absolutely. Yeah. It's, as you said, a slog. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Mhm,
But on the other side, it's like, think about the number of years it took to program you. Well, of course, it's going to
mhm.
take some time to unprogram.
And going from being dissociated to not dissociated is the most painful switch.
Mm.
If you're holding trauma in your body and all of a sudden you're aware of it, you go from, I'm just ignoring it and I'm not feeling it, to, oh, my body's been keeping the score for 20 years and I'm in pain every day and my knee hurts all the time and, all these different things.
Hmm.
It's the grief that comes with that.
Hmm.
It's just a lot. But that doesn't mean stop.
Yeah. No, I have visceral memories of those exact moments doing a physical practice of like not feeling and then feeling searing pain in my body,
Yeah.
just doing an embodiment practice and being like, oh, that's there all the time. Um,
Mhm.
but as much as your capacity is to feel that grief or pain, it's also, you can feel the depth of pleasure and joy.
Mhm.
So it's like if you've chosen to live a life of, not chosen, but it's been forced upon you and you don't see that you have a choice. It's like the path of regaining access to choice. It's not an easy one, but there's so much more on the other side.
Yeah.
And how can people find you? Yeah,
Yeah. I'm at www.deconstructiondoulas.com, at Deconstruction Doulas on all the social media handle.
beautiful. Thank you. And where are you located?
We're in Kansas City.
In Kansas City. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. All right. Well, I hope there are more resources that pop up all over the country in the same vein because we definitely need them. And, so good to get to spend this time with you.
You too. Thank you for having me.
So Margaret did list a lot of different resources when she was talking about what embodied freedom means to her. And she also talked about some really excellent resources when she was answering how her and her husband approach somatics on their own. So there's a lot of intuitive wisdom, and we all have access to it, but there's also something to be said about being guided and feeling held by an external resource. And so let's see. This feels like an important practice to remind everyone of. It's a very simple exercise, but orienting. I know that there are so many conversations that we are in currently that where you might feel yourself be overwhelmed and space out. And so orienting is something that you can do throughout your day. So first, look around, let your eyes, first of all, go ahead and close your eyes. You can put your hands on your belly. Feel your hands and also feel your belly. Take a big breath. You can move your hands if you want. You can feel them moving against your clothing or your skin. Notice the temperature that your body is, the temperature of the air on your skin. And put your feet on the floor if they're underneath you, if you're, let your feet kind of just like move back and forth on the floor. You can press firmly into the soles of your feet. Feel how it affects the muscles in your legs. And let it go. Exhaling. Go ahead and look around your room. Look around the space that you're in. And notice what colors you see. If there's an object that you find interesting, let your eyes rest on it. Notice the curves and the texture, the size. You can even reach out and pick it up and feel it in your hand if it's close enough to grab or small enough to grab. Notice what time of day it is. Say the time and the date to yourself. Remind yourself of how old you are, what year it is. Right? All of these things are ways to orient in space and time. And it is a useful practice to just have in your back pocket. And you can do it when you don't need it terribly so that you actually have more access to it when you really need it, right? When you're really disoriented. So, with that, thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode was informative. And just knowing that it's possible to heal after this kind of programming is a really important thing to remember. Like as devastating as whatever path you've been on has been, it is also possible to end up on a completely unexpected and different one. So if this was an useful episode, please like, rate, review, and share it with your friends. If you'd like more information about the work that I'm doing, I have an online course that really helps you begin your path of embodiment and understanding how your belief systems have shaped you and understanding how different parts of you can be in conflict and making more peace and accepting all parts of yourself. And that course is a month-long daily practice course to really help you step onto a new path. That is available at charnacassell.com as well as passionatelife.org. You can read more about my work at passionatelife.org. You can join my newsletter. I have free monthly meditations that I offer. And you can follow me on Late Open Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. I look forward to staying connected and be well.